Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. You dialed set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're here, and we broadcast 2 hours. 2 hours daily from the Missouri Ozark Mountains. John is engineering the broadcast. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. And if you'd like to listen to USA Prepares 24/7, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Rick Miller's with us. Welcome, Dr. Richard Allen Miller.
Good morning, Vincent. I loved Vietnam and Tronauer. That was something I even listened to back then. He was that famous.
Yep.
He was a broadcaster in Vietnam when Radio Free Europe was down in the dumps and the whole thing was starting to fall apart at the seams.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now I'm looking back and realizing that all of us were duped.
We were.
This war wasn't even about those poor villagers and their 18th century way of living.
Yeah. Yeah. And we bombed them to smithereens. We
for what purpose?
We napalmed them. We lit them on fire.
That in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What we did was absolutely horrible. We had daisy cutter bombs that we would drop them and they would go off and they would just cut everything down like a big lawnmower. It didn't matter what it was. It would just obliterate everything in its radius.
That's when Monsanto was still a weapons company before they got into GMOs and the colossal giant that they have now become. Oh, no, wait a minute. They just sold to Bayer on some Nazis. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rick, I've asked a lot of people who were in that conflict, the Vietnam War, or the Vietnam conflict.
Yeah.
So what was it all about? What was it all about? And, why did we do it? And no one really has a good, clear answer that makes any sense. Other than
money. War is good for business. When I visited you, you showed me a little button with Ford Motor Company with a Nazi signal right on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a lapel pin. It is a lapel pin. And guys would wear these in their suit coats. And it would show the Ford blue oval, the Ford logo that's still in use today, adjoined side by side with the red background Nazi swastika. Yes. And so Ford was saying that they were aligned with Nazis. No question about it. And
it was good for business.
Yeah, it wasn't.
They sold us both weapons, and they sold us both automobiles, and they didn't care who you were. They just made money, which was what. And Harvey, that's where war became what it really is.
Harvey Firestone was a good friend of Henry Ford, and for many, many years, all new Fords that came off the assembly line were fitted with Firestone tires. So if Ford was in it, Firestone was in it. By association.
Let's talk about Mobil Oil and how they got in it and the oil thing. Listen, the whole thing's nuts. I was in graduate school at the time. My graduating class, 62, We were not at war with Vietnam, and yet my entire graduating class went to Vietnam, except people like myself that went to graduate school and then were allowed to make weapons as graduate students. So I did. I made the first infrared visual goggles. There were 17 of them that were made, and I was one of the 17 graduate students that put that together for Vietnam. And, I didn't understand then what the, peace sign and the love, his free love meant. I was right there, part of it, all in the 60s. But guess what? Half of my graduating class never came home. And Don White, I was best man at his wedding, 1 week later, they didn't even have enough of his body left to even identify him. I lived it. Mm-hmm. 62 is when I graduated, and that's when all my buddies went, football players, wrestlers, kids I went to high school with, they're gone.
Yep, and the class, the Vietnam War was 1954 through 1975.
I remember when Lyndon Baines Johnson did not want to end that war. I remember. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why would he want to do that? It was good for our economy.
Yeah, and that's why we've said for a very long time here, never reelect anyone, because that's the kind of stuff they do. And I got to tell you, I've talked with parents, I've talked with high school boys about enlisting in service and the reasons not to do it, and they don't want to hear it. They love that uniform. They love the
and they want to support our vets, and that part has meaning, but it is ill-placed because of the wrong intentional reasons.
Yeah. I was at a farm supply buying some protein lick tubs. I bought 12 of them. They were 200 pounds apiece. We had our trailer, and our son and I were there, and these two guys were helping us load the trailer with these 200-pounders. And I asked one of the guys, if he was going to school, and he said he was taking a semester off. And then later I asked him, so what does he want to do? And he said he wanted to be a cop. And I'm like, oh, no. So he wants to be a cop. And ultimately, a little bit later, I asked him, why? Why do you want to be a cop? And he says he likes guns. He likes guns, so he wants to be a cop. And then specifically, he told me he wants to be a SWAT cop. And I said, killing people. And he smiled. That's sick. It is so upsetting to me that this young guy, handsome young guy, is so misguided. Somebody taught him that it's really cool to be at the trigger end of a SWAT incident, which is really an execution. That's what it is. It's murder. It's premeditated murder. And this guy wants to do it. He wants to sign up for it. He can't wait to get behind that .308 rifle. Can't wait.
Well, that's Alice's restaurant, and I want to kill, Serge. I want to kill.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've fallen pretty far, Rick. And I remember talking to some parents of a high schooler many years ago and explaining, when your son enlists, he's not the only one that has a gun. And he's not the only one that's going to be shooting. There's going to be plenty of shooting. And people are going to be shooting at him. And he may not come back. Is it worth it? And why are we doing it? And why are old men sending young men to die? Why? For patriotism? Come on. I'm not buying it. For freedom? I'm not buying it. We go into Vietnam and we obliterate the country. And we say, well, now you've got some freedom. Isn't that great? We've destroyed their way of life, their infrastructure. We've poisoned their land, their air, their water. And we believe that they ought to thank us for that. That's just one small country that we've picked on. It's like the big, mean giant.
I'll see how I just tangented us from what we decided we were going to do. That's
hey, I'll
what
tell you,
I love about you, Vinny. You're so cool, and really, you have a wealth of information and stories. That's what makes working with you so much fun.
Let me tell you a story about yesterday.
Here you go.
So, here we go. So yesterday, I spent some time with Dr. Shealy in his office, and I'll tell you a little bit about that later at Scalar Technology. But after that, I had in my vehicle a couple cases of Matt Stein's book, When Technology Fails, and he called the house and wanted, the last time you and Matt and I were together, he said, hey, can you take these cases? And because it was difficult for him to fly back with a couple cases of books. So I said, sure. So I put them in my truck, took them back to the farm, and he asked me if I could, contacted us, asked me if I could get him over to Pensacola, where he's going to be speaking. So we said, sure. So I had him in my car, and the UPS service center only opens at 3 to 6 p.m. in Springfield. So after Dr. Shealy's broadcast yesterday, I had a little bit of time. So I went over to Sam's Club, and I was in line to get a bite to eat. Normally I don't do these kind of things, but I did. So Rick, one of the people I met yesterday, the same man that I had lunch with, or a bite to eat with at Sam's, is a registered nurse, and he's a hospice nurse. And I've invited him to come on the air with us, and he's going to think about what that means, because he wants to talk to his company to get permission to do this. So, that's a pretty tough job, being a hospice nurse, because what happens is that when you go see your patient for the first time, day number 1, that's the very, very best condition that you're going to see that patient in for most cases. And then it gets worse from there, and then ultimately, typically the patient dies. So I've invited him to come on the air, and he may do that. So I'm looking forward to learning more about hospice, how it works, and so forth. So, Rick, what are you up to lately? Are you going to be traveling? Are you going to be dispensing your information?
Until April and May are big days for me. In April. I'm down in Puebla, Mexico. I have been invited back down to an international conference on consciousness. This one is going to be dealing with aliens, and they have speakers from all over the world coming in, and I'm fortunate to be part of this. This is based on my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner, and the last time I went down, I got to visit and get to meet some very cool people, including Eben Alexander, and who wrote Proof of Heaven, and others like that. And it's just incredible. Let's see, what else am I doing? In May, and I'm worried about Puebla, because that's where I'm going to be, because of Popo. It's active, and there's going to be about 8 million people that get killed when that one actually finally blows. It's throwing smoke right now. It was doing that when I was down in 2014. In May, we're going to Colorado, and it's Gaia TV, and Nexus Magazine is doing the first Nexus conference in more than 15 years, and it'll be a large event. I will be one of the keynote speakers. By the way, that's in May 1st, and Beltane. And in April, my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner, is going to be there, and he doesn't know this yet, but I have dedicated the non-local mind and a holographic universe to that man. He's the one that introduced me to Edgar Mitchell in 1970, that allowed me to be part of mission control with Ed Mitchell's moonwalk, going around the moon. We did the ESP studies in 1971. That led to the ESP book I wrote for Nick Begich. And I want to give it to him in living memory. He's the one that recognized my holographic concept of reality and got me to go to Prague. He's the one that had SEAL Corporation contact me to work with Navy SEALs, and then later MRU with Navy Intelligence and Dr. Carl Schleicher. And so that's my mentor, Dr. Stanley Krippner. He with Maimonides Dream Labs up in New York with Montague Ullman and wrote Dream Telepathy that led to Dreamscape and other movies that were like that. That's based on his work. And then he's the one in Prague that published the Psychoenergetic Systems with Gordon and Breach and included my works in there and my presentation in the International Conference on Psychotronics. That's way back in the early 70s, and he's still alive. He's formed Saybrook Institute out of San Francisco, humanistic psychology. He's a psychologist, and so he's been my friend. He comes up to visit me every year when he comes to Ashland to do Shakespeare, and so he got a chance to meet Julie. I'm very excited about Grace Thorne. Hi, Grace. Yes, I'm giving her a ring. But it's going to be nice when Grace finally moves back where she belongs out here. It's just not the same without her presence on a daily basis here in Oregon. A lot of people
class, for those of you who have not heard the name Grace Thorne. Grace Thorne is a USA Preparedness instructor, and she at one time was a 6th grade teacher in Ryan, Oklahoma. And every 6 weeks or so, she would occupy the conference room at her school with her entire class, her 6th grade class. And they would prepare questions that they wanted answers to that they couldn't get out of their books and from other sources. And they would come on the air with us one at a time for 2 hours and ask their questions of Dr. Richard Allen Miller. So, Rick, I was visiting with Dr. Shealy at the International Holistic Medicine Clinic in Springfield, Missouri. And he has this room, which he calls the Scalar Room. He and Dr. Sergey Sorin operate this practice in Springfield, Missouri. And they have this room that's like a conference room. And it has these 4 scalar energy, I'll call them transmitters. And they are powered up, and they've got blinking lights. And when you go into this room, there's a sense of calm within a minute or two. It's almost instantaneous. And he has these recliner chairs, these comfortable, thick padded recliner chairs, and you can put your feet up. And some of our instructors were there, and they just kind of showed up, and they pulled up a seat and started relaxing. And the sensation that I felt was the same sensation that I asked everyone, what they were feeling. I asked them on the air yesterday. We were broadcasting live from there. And I asked them, what they felt. And we all felt this sensation of tingling, like pins and needles if your leg or arm is going to sleep. And but it was a sense of calm as well as that. And those who might be a little bit nervous were relieved of a lot of that, apprehension of being on the air. So can you tell us, that's what I experienced when I was in this scalar energy room. Can you tell us what your thoughts are of scalar energy? What is it? How does it work?
Yeah, I can. Scalar is a term that was first coined by Bearden out of Texas. He was an engineer that worked under some of the projects I did for Schleicher. And basically, it's like a scalar is a lesser component. That means that if you are walking on the earth with the sun hitting you, your shadow would be a scalar. It's you. It reflects what you're doing, but to a lesser octave. That means it doesn't have a third dimension of component to it. It's lesser. That's what scalar means. Now, the way Hutchinson and others in the so-called Hutchinson effect worked was that they will use radar to try to set up a resonant cavity oscillation that scales up to a higher dimension of experience. It's like a metaphor. And so like in your body, the way a microtubule will talk to a cell salt and the way the cell salt will talk to the cell, and the way the cell talks to the liver, and the way the liver talks to the body, that is a scalar progression of resonance. And the way, if you do this, it has an effect in a higher plane here. And so it is a concept that is used to understand that this radar is, or the smoke you got down going down the road, is having an effect on higher functions of the body. Now, what Norm and others have done is use, for example, sacred geometry that will somehow focus electromagnetic fields, gamma rays, whatever, to a higher vibratory level, so that, okay, the way the Buddhists did it is that they would have a bowl of water and they would chant across the water, and if they could get the water to start to vibrate to their voice, it would, if they had the right pitch, cause a standing wave to form, which later was called the Sri Yantra, or sacred geometry. That's where sacred geometry came from. Cymatics started with water and sound, and the relationship of and if you did that correctly, a vibratory wave would go across the water for the rim and the size of the bowl. That's called, that Bessel functions, that would set up a sacred geometry. That's where it all came from in the terms of cymatics. And basically, it is a resonant cavity oscillation. And if you do it just right, phenomena happens on all levels of the hologram, all the way up into 5, 6, and 8 dimensions. It goes right on up the scale. That's why they call it scalar. Now, it is a metaphor of what Norm, others have done, and when they do it in the right positions in their house, the right positions on Earth, now the Earth becomes a resonant cavity oscillator with the Bermuda Triangle, the Oregon Vortex, the da-da-da-da-da, that we have found phenomena across the Earth, what were called ley lines. And that's why you put all the churches in that direction, and you put all the castles in that direction. And there were places where the castle would go, and where this came out of Druidic magic and those systems from previous epochs. And we studied these in the military, and later had scalar weapons, one of which is, what we call silent squid, or what later became synthetic telepathy, where you use a microwave band, and then you can heterodyne on that microwave band voices so that you can hear them in the head, because the microwave would cause the temporal lobe to resonate or ring like a bell, heat up slightly and become liquid crystal. And then they would be able to hear the voices in the head using 0.3 to 3 gigahertz. It's technology. Now, what Norm has done is set up his chamber or magic circle, or the place where he does business, where he has a closed system where you can get away from the noxious, toxic vibratories of the Earth itself and get into a place where you're more centered for yourself, and then you can do the work you're supposed to be doing, whatever that is. I don't know if you got all of that, but it's a simple concept of scaling from one dimension of information to higher dimensions using resonance.
So Rick, the feeling that I had, the feeling that the others in the room had during that broadcast, 2 hours, are those what you would have expected us to feel, this tingling sensation?
Everybody's going to see the color differently, hear the word differently. Is red the same for you as it is me? Yes and no. Yes. Yes. It doesn't matter, because red is an arbitrary bandwidth going from yellow to blue. It varies. There's, and so why is it that we call this one red? Actually, they're all different colors, and everybody feels slightly different because it turns out we're all different tuning forks. However, there are bandwidths where everybody agrees, yes, that's blue and that's purple. So you know the distinction between when it becomes orange and when it becomes red. And pretty much we all agree on that part of it. And so there's bandwidths going from red to yellow. And we say this is red and we say this is yellow because we make a distinction in a more binary digital form, if you will. That it's incremental and rather than analog. And that's how we call metaphor.
A man came in, senior citizen, he had lymphoma, and he was in a lot of pain. And his pain subsided in parts of his body during his stay in that room, while I was there. And we got to be friends, and I've invited him to be on the air with us.
You know why it stopped there in that room? Because, and I'll tell you why, because he had anger, and when he went in that room, the anger subsided. And anger is the first step toward cancer. I don't know anybody that has cancer that did not first start with anger. And that's what...
It's very interesting that you say that. Very interesting that you say that, because he shared a story with me about how he was on a motorcycle. And a woman who was drunk crashed into him. Really banged him up. I mean, really, really messed him up. And as a result, he has metal in him. And I asked him about that. I said, I think if my son were involved in an accident or somebody rammed into him and he were able to get up and that were the situation, he would walk up to that person and say, "Are you okay?" And if the person said yes, my son would knock him out right after that. For being insensitive, for being stupid, for being careless, and for banging my son up. I mean, I can just see our son doing that. Actually, I can see both of our boys doing that. Not that I said, if somebody runs into him, the first thing you do is see if they're all right and then knock them out. I've never said that to him, but I can understand how they would just react to stupidity like that. And the man said that, he was angry for quite a long time. Very interesting that you mentioned that. So,
and that's how it works.
And I'm quite certain that
there's another scalar concept where anger vibratories up into the physical plane. That's why all illnesses
I can tell you.
I can tell you a metaphor, on how to look at what a scalar really means.
Yeah, it's brilliant, Rick, what you're doing. I can tell you that, this guy and I, he happened to be a Hollywood stuntman for a couple of years, and we were talking about that, and we were laughing and having a great time. And I was so glad that I had the opportunity to meet him. And of course, I invited him to come on the air with us and tell us about some of his experiences in Hollywood and how it works and so forth. But he shared something very interesting with me, and that was, he said, you see those motorcycle crashes in Hollywood in the films, and he said, they look like these big Harleys. He said, really, what they are little Honda dirt bikes, and with big gas tanks to make them look like these big Harley motorcycles. He said they're not, and it's a little easier to take one on a spill and survive it if it's a little Honda with a big gas. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Class, if you'd like to read some of his books, buy some of his books, you can go to docram.com, DocRam.com, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. And Rick, so my understanding is that a scalar is a lesser component, as a shadow is a lesser component of me. A shadow of a building is a, yes, or a shadow is a lesser component of a building.
That's the key word. But in this case, your shadow is with the sun. In Norm's case, it's with electromagnetic radiation and da-da-da. Okay, it's a lesser component reference to something else.
Okay, so would the shadow be a lesser component of me, or would it be of the sun?
It's a lesser component of you in reference to the sun. And that's why in previous epochs they would call the shadow a demon. It was a lesser component of an angel. It was a fallen angel, a lesser component. An angel is more than human. Then you have human in 3 dimensions, and then in 2 dimensions you would have shadow. And that's why in Jungian psychotherapy they call the shadow your demons. The lesser parts are a projection of the shadow. When you can see something evil in someone else, that's the only reason you can do that is in reference to it having existed within yourself.
All right. So
I just took you to another level of concepts. And I want you to understand that it's always, scalars are always in reference to some system. And in this case, it would be your shadow would be in reference to the sun.
Okay. And the man who came into the scalar room while I was there, who had lymphoma, his pain subsided. Now, is this possibly mind over matter, or is this a possibility that his...
Yeah, it's in reference to that. He had less pain.
Mm-hmm. Now, does that mean...
In the reference system of Earth and this room being sanctuary.
Okay. Is it possible that he had less pain because his body is rebuilding itself and fixing itself with the addition of being in this scalar energy?
If you did not have pain, you would not be alive. You are basically consuming yourself by the electromagnetic transmitters, literally consuming your physical body. What you're trying to do is put it below a certain level of threshold for consciousness, because it is consciousness that creates the pain, the cancer, and the feelings of goodwill. And you have a choice. That's what made you God's favorite. And we forget that, and we get consumed, like I have been recently, with depression, and I have to take personal responsibility. And having sanctuary, whether you do it in hypnosis, a scalar room like Norm has, that is what is written about in my ESP book called The Mind Room, where you go briefly for sanctuary. You draw a circle around yourself, and you become within yourself, rather than being external to all the influences of soot, Fukushima, and war. It's a metaphor.
That brings to mind going to church, Rick.
Well, then that's what the church is about, and why churches at one time in history were put here, not there.
So is there scalar energy within a church that is just there? And is that why some people feel better about going to church?
The power of the group will actually consecrate a situation, just like we could if we all went kumbaya and decided we had enough of this BS going on. World thought would change.
Well, that's what the Catholic Church tried to do with every Mass.
There you go.
Stand up, sit down, genuflect, all in unison, ready, set, go. I'm not being sacrilegious. I'm saying that's the way it is.
And you'll notice all your elders are on the outside of the parishioners inside, and they put the elders against the wall to focus the energy.
There you go. Rick, we'll be right back after these short commercial announcements and top of the hour news. Dr. Richard Allen Mills with DocRam.com. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with Kurt Wilson. And his website is armchairsurvivalist.com. And he's a broadcaster. He broadcasts from 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the internet, AM, FM, shortwave, and satellite. Kurt Wilson's a USA Prepares instructor. Welcome, Kurt.
How you doing, Vince?
I'm really well. I was thinking as the intro to this hour started up about our electric utility company and our cooperative. And I was thinking about our topic today, insulation. And as you know, Kurt Wilson, I'm a farmer, and I raise black Angus cows. I've got some red Angus cows as well, but Angus cows. And so we, when we first moved here and set up a shop, if you will, we built this house and insulated it very, very well. We used closed cell foam, and we used some fiberglass in addition to the closed cell foam. And our electric bill was typically less than $100 per month. And the next thing I knew, the utility trucks were on our farm opening up those green underground junction boxes that connect the underground power cables, because all of our utilities at this farm run from the road, then they go underground for about 1,300 feet on our farm. And so the trucks were here, and these guys are opening these up, and they're looking at the wiring, and they're scratching their heads, and they're trying to figure out how we operate our farm, do all the stuff we do, and our electric bill is less than $100 a month. So, so I said, "Hey guys, how's it going?" And this was years ago. And hey, Mr. Finelli, so what are you doing? Just making sure that all these boxes are plumb and level, and, there's a little settling going on, and we're just making sure that everything's wired correctly, junctions are tight.
Yeah, they're making sure that you're not bootlegging anything.
Really, you're absolutely right. What they were looking for is some siphoning off of some electricity,
Yep.
And that's what it was all about. And so it was so unusual for an operation of ours, our size, not that we're large, but of our size operation, to use so little of their electricity. And so they really thought that we were helping ourselves to some free electricity, which they found we weren't. And so the point of that is, when we built this house and set up shop, we looked at efficiencies every way we could. And it was so unusual in our neck of the woods that they sent out some trucks to investigate. We didn't call them. They figured it out. They said something's really wrong, because we're using about 1/4 the amount of electricity that others that do what we do are using. And that's kind of one of the topics of today, and that is insulation. And how do we improve or how do we save money? Because as John Statmiller told me the last time I talked to him on the phone, which was a few days ago, he indicated that I'm really frugal. And I said, "You're right. I absolutely am frugal. I don't like wasting anything." I said, my parents were raised in the Depression, and there wasn't much. And they had to make everything last a long time, and they had to be interested in quality and taking care of what they did have, and they had to grow their own food to supplement what they bought at the store. And that's just the way it was, and that's kind of how I was raised. And I think that you come from the same point of view, that you are frugal and you don't waste anything. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. And it astounds some people. I live on yard sales. As soon as in North Idaho, we have 2 seasons. We have winter and construction. So as soon as construction starts, people start having yard sales. So we go to them, my son and I, and I find things. I don't know, maybe I have the ability to see the future, but I go to this yard sale, and this guy has 4 doorbells. These are, the normal ones with the transformer and the button and the actual doorbell inside the house, and he wants $5 for all 4 of them, and they're $20 a piece at Home Depot. So I go, what the hell? Someday one of them's going to go out. So I buy it and I put it in my special shed. Mm-hmm. And this is for the stuff that someday I'll use. Sure enough, 10 years later, my doorbell went out. Mm-hmm. And I had a spare doorbell. But my best investment at a yard sale was when we first moved here in '99. I went to a yard sale at a big farm, and there were 5 bales of blow-in insulation. Mm-hmm. Now, these are $20 a piece at Lowe's. I mean, these things are 100 pounds each. Mm-hmm. And he wanted started off with $50, and I said, no, I could probably use that, but nah, not good enough. So he followed me around. Like, if you ever been to Tijuana, the vendors follow you around, and first they start off with $10, and by the time they're done, they say $1.50. Mm-hmm. So as I'm leaving, he goes, look, $5, take them all. I couldn't pass it up.
Sure.
Because I just bought a house that was made in 1971. In the attic, the insulation was an inch thick. That's it. It was just enough for color. So I gave him $5 for these bales, and I went to Home Depot, told them I wanted to rent their unit, and they said, where'd you buy the bales? I said, a yard sale, but they got your label on them. He goes, oh, well, in that case, you can use this free. So my son and I spent the next 4 hours blowing in about a total of 12 inches of insulation into the attic, which I picked up for $5. And while I'm up there, it's cold because I'm noticing that there's openings in the siding where the siding connects down, lays over the lower piece of siding, and there's lines. You can see air coming through that. So I'm thinking, it's not a good idea to have a house that is this poorly insulated, not just in the attic, but everywhere else. So what I did was I went to Harbor Freight, and I found a little electronic gizmo. It's a laser thermometer. It cost, well, when I bought it, it was $50. Now you can buy them in Harbor Freight for $10. It's the size of a keychain fob. You point it at something, push the button, and it tells you what that temperature is. Okay. So what I did was, now I did this part further into the season once winter started. I had the heaters on in the house. I went outside, and I have a notepad with me, and I'm pointing this thing at all different parts of my house. Now it's basically 45 degrees outside, and it's probably about 65 degrees in the house. And some parts of my house are 46, 47 degrees. Other parts are 65 degrees, like around the door, the bottom of the door, and the sides of the door. And I had just had double pane windows installed in my house, and they were the same temperature as the outside, but guess what? The edge along the windows, there was heat coming out of them. Because when they'd installed the windows, they didn't insulate around the windows. Normally what they would do when they put windows in, they plumb them in, and there's going to be about an inch space on both sides. Mm-hmm. Right. And they just put molding over the top of that. They don't insulate. So I'm writing this down, and by the time I got done, I was astounded how many heat leaks under the garage door. My garage is connected to the house, and obviously there's leaks from the door going into the garage, so it's leaking out underneath the garage door the seal. So that's something that I had to replace, a garage door seal. And the sweeps on all of my doors underneath had to be replaced. So when you buy a brand new door, they have a little sweep underneath there that's like a seal. It's installed at the factory. Those wear out. You've got to put new ones on. I never even thought of this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So the windows, the doors, and a lot of the siding wasn't firmly pressed down against the lower siding, and there was actually heat coming out. I mean, if you look at a house that's normal, you got the 2x4 studs, okay, and then you have on one side you have the siding, on the other side you have the sheetrock, and in between you might have some fiberglass insulation. That's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if anything's leaking on the outside, if air's coming on the outside into that area, it's going to be coming out of that area into all these different places, like your light sockets, the receptacles boxes, all along the bottom of your house, those things you plug your lamp into.
Yeah, a lot of them are cold.
I could not. It was astounding. I take the plate off, and I'm getting 40 degrees when I put my laser in there and test it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, this is inside. This is crazy. So all of the things you need are at Home Depot or Lowe's. Now, I had double pane windows, but when I went to pistol smithing school at Denver, and that house, it was built about 1910, and it had this simple, believe it or not, it was lead glass. in the windows. And I simply got plastic sheeting, stapled it around the outside, and that gave it a dead air space between the sheeting and the window, and that cut all that stopped all insulation leak, all heat leak, all cold coming in, heat going out. And you can buy those kits now. In fact, they're modern now. You buy these kits for the window, and it has tack strips with it, and it's a plastic sheet. You put it up on the outside, and you tack it down all the way around, and then you take a hairdryer and you lightly heat it up, and it shrinks as tight as if it's a piece of glass. And it doesn't look that bad, and it can be taken down once construction starts. So there are different things to do throughout your house, and you can extrapolate this data onto anything, whether it's a house, a condominium, a cabin, even to a degree your camper, motorhome, trailer.
Kurt Wilson's with us. ArmchairSurvivalist.com. And Kurt, I've got a question for you. I want to share a thought about what I'd like to do in our great room. We have a room that has a lot of glass on it, and we don't need that much glass. And I'd like to save some of the muscle power that we use cutting and stacking and storing wood. We'll be right back. Kurt Wilson's with us, ArmchairSurvivalist.com. So, Kurt, I looked up that Centec non-contact pocket thermometer that you're talking about, the size of a key fob. It's great. It's about $10. I see one on eBay, free shipping, $13.50. And I found the one that I used. We have one here, and we've mentioned it on the air. Mine is more like a pistol grip, and that's available for around $10 to $20 as well, and you can get that at Harbor Freight. So what I did was I did the same thing that you did. I walked around in the summer as well as the winter, and I aimed that non-contact thermometer at the garage doors, and they face west. And in the afternoon, the garage doors were well over 100 degrees, well over 100, like 120, 130 degrees. I aimed at the roof, well over 130 degrees, maybe 138, 148. And we don't have a black roof. We've got kind of a wood bark colored roof. And so I was aiming it at we have a stone house, kind of a gray colored stone. I aimed it at the stone. I aimed it at a tractor tire I had parked in the sun, and that was over 130 degrees. So I became really aware of color and temperature and how much heat was in the areas of the outside of our house. And then I went inside and I aimed that thermometer to see if we had heat leaks, and see if the heat was coming in during the summer, for which we'd have to use energy to cool those heat leaks, meaning air conditioning. And in the wintertime, I use that same non-contact thermometer. It has a little laser pointer, and you kind of has a pistol grip, and you aim it at the roof or wherever you're trying to determine where you have temperature changes. And here's what I found. It's really simple. You can do this without any money at all. When it snows, or you have a light dusting of snow, you look at the roofs, and you look at the neighbors' roofs, and you look at where the snow's melting. And if their roof is melting faster than yours, they've got poorer insulation than you have, generally speaking. They've got heat leaks. And so the heat's leaking up through the attic and melting the snow on the roof. So what you can do in your house is look at where the snow is melting first, and that's where the heat is leaking out. I forgot to mention one thing when I was doing the testing. I have a fireplace. I have two fireplaces in my house. And where the chimney meets the roof, heat was coming out right there. So we just had a new roof put on. So when they did this, I told them I wanted special flashing, and then it goes up 8 inches on one side and comes under the roof 8 inches on the other side, and all the way around the chimney and every other vent on my roof. And the guy's like, "You know something, don't you?" He said, "Does it leak there?" I said, "Just heat. It leaks heat, and cold comes through there. I can see it." So he laughed. He goes, "You're one of few people who even know what this flashing's for." Yeah. So you can learn a lot, and you can do some research before you have these jobs like roofing done. Another thing you might want to check on is the color. Now, I called the manufacturers of some roofing products, shingle companies, and I asked them, where do I can't find where do I find the ratings about absorption of heat, based on color? They said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, okay, so black absorbs heat the most, white absorbs heat the least, green is somewhere in the middle. Where is that? Where is that chart? I can't find it. And they said, we don't have one. And I said, why? And they said, well, we were advised not to because of the lawyers. Isn't that ridiculous? So, if you live in Florida, you probably want a roof that you certainly don't want a black roof in Florida. That's it'd be unbearable. And maybe in your neck of the woods where it's a little colder, you might want a darker colored roof. So it'd be nice to be able to make that decision rather than style. What style, what color roof would look nice. How about working with nature instead of fighting nature?
Well, you can do that.
That's what we're all about.
You can find out heat refraction index on colors, and it's a typical physics problem, and you can find the answer on the internet on that. But I had mine when I had mine put up. I used a green, and you're right about that. You can look around and see the different roofs and how long the snow sets and where does it evaporate first and where does it dry out first. Now, we got an inch of snow last night, and every house that I'm looking at has hot spots on it and snow melted in some parts. My house is a complete sheet of snow on my roof, and it's not melted at all.
And they're probably looking at you thinking, boy, that poor guy's freezing in there. Look at his roof. We'll be right back. Kurt Wilson. Kurt Wilson's with us. Kurt, I was thinking back during the break about what you did with that blow-in insulation. I think there's a really important point that needs to be underscored, emphasized, and a couple exclamation points put on it. And that is, you found an opportunity. Number one, you were not shy about going to a yard sale. Number two, and there's no reason to be shy about going to a yard sale. The person that's selling whatever it is that's being sold is really glad you're there, hoping that you're going to be spending some money, and that person will have the receipt of cash, and you're going to have lowered his inventory. That's what that guy's looking for. So you never know what you're going to find. And so, number one, you were certainly willing to do that, and that's a point that we should make, that no one should be embarrassed or ashamed or afraid to go to a yard sale. Number two, you found something there that you thought you might be able to use, and price overcomes all objections. So at $50 for the installation, it's nice to have, but not worth $50 in your mind. And then when the price came down, at one point, you said, I'm going to do it, and you jumped on it. Now, that's another point. So price overcomes all objections. The next thing that I'd like to put an exclamation point is that you decided that you were going to tackle this job. You were going to use that insulation that you bought. You were going to figure out how to get the equipment at what I believe would be the lowest cost, which would be try to rent it. And you were going to do that and save some money in the long run by blowing in this insulation. So you took it upon yourself to do that job and to make the result happen. So kudos to you for doing that. And class, you can all do the same thing. Now, of course, when you handle insulation, you're going to want to wear a respirator, and you're going to want to wear eye protection. You want to wear, long sleeve shirt and gloves, and tuck your socks into your pants. I mean, that's what you're going to want to do. But yeah, you can do it.
Well, and you bring up a good point. And the thing is, and this is what survivalism is. It has nothing to do with crawling on your belly in the woods with a gun and living off dirt. It has to do with your ability and willingness, those two words, your ability and willingness to perform tasks that heretofore have been unachievable for most people, or even for you. You look at something, you say, this is something that needs to be fixed, I'm going to do it, and then you actually do. In reality, there's no such thing as failure, because perseverance overcomes failure of any kind.
I have an old Mercedes that has been in our family for years. It was my mother's. It's an ML320. It's a little SUV, six-cylinder V6, all-wheel drive. And the reason we had it is my dad was in a car accident, and it was very difficult to get him in and out of most vehicles. But the front doors on this ML320 open 90 degrees. So it's a great vehicle, all-wheel drive, very, very well built. But after a couple 100,000 miles, the transfer case failed. I had the opportunity to, bring it to a shop, $1,500, $2,000 to have it fixed. So I looked around. I found on the internet a used transfer case with lower miles. So I bought it. It arrived a couple of days ago, and right after the broadcast, I'm going to take the old one out. Our son and I are going to take the old one out and put the new one in. Have I done that before on a Mercedes? No. But am I going to do it? Absolutely. So for $185, I believe, plus some ATF, some Dexron 3 transmission fluid that's going to take 2 quarts of, I'm going to have this vehicle up and running again. So I could either say, well, it's junk, or I could part it out, or I could look at it, rusting in the driveway, or for $185, I could put it back into service. And that's what I decided to do. So the point is, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't do it.
And that's the key. You have so many people nowadays that when they look at a task or of anything, it could be searching for something on the internet to insulating your house, to putting molding back down that had come up, to handling the cabinets in your kitchen that they used to be dark walnut, now they're all weird colors, and you don't know what to do, and they instantly in their mind say, I don't know how to do it, so I'm going to fail. Mm-hmm. That's it. Mm-hmm. They instantly consider themselves a failure, and they think that's okay.
Now, there's some things that you can do that are proactive, and let me share one of those with you. When we built our house, I decided to raise the garage ceiling to about 12 feet. And the reason was I wanted to put an automotive lift inside the garage, and it's there. And I decided that I would buy one, and I would install it myself. I had never installed one of these lifts before, but I planned the garage floor, and I put the concrete and the rebar, extra heavy rebar, every 12 inches under where the lift pads were, a foot thick concrete there. It only requires 4 inches, but I wanted to make sure that the lift didn't fall down and kill somebody. Well, when I was putting it in, I was looking at the garage door. It's a 9-foot by 9-foot garage door. I was looking at it, and I thought, someday I'm gonna need to do an axle and remove an axle from a vehicle. So I better shift the lift several inches to the left from center of the garage door. So I did that. And I was teaching one of our instructors how to replace a rear axle bearing on his old truck, his 1977, I think his truck was. And I stopped and I looked at him and I said, you know why the lift is off center? Because I knew I was going to be putting an axle in someday, but I didn't know it was going to be yours.
That's smart. That's thinking ahead. That's thinking, people don't, I don't know. I see this all the time. And we have a store in Hayden, Idaho, and I have people come in all the time and they ask questions of how to do something. I used to have this on my show. I say, okay, now it's time to stump the survivalist. Yeah. Where they'd call in and try and ask me a question that would stump me. And in 10 years, nobody ever did. And it's not because I'm the smartest cookie in the box. It's just that I have the ability to evaluate similarities, differences, and to extrapolate the data I already have into the future. You just mentioned axle, and I'm driving. I have a 1956 Chevy station wagon. I'm driving it in Oregon, in nowhere, Oregon. And I come to a stop alongside the road, and I go to take off again, and all that happens is I hear a whirring sound and crunching. I broke an axle, and I just out of nowhere, it just snapped. So most people would say, well, I got AAA maybe, and I'll call them and have them tow me to a gas station or to a repair place, and it'll cost me about $500 to have it fixed. When I just evaluated exactly what had happened, there was a junkyard 2 miles down the road. I went down there, bought an axle, hitchhiked back, and alongside the road, I replaced that axle. And, you got to take apart the rear end, take the gear off, the clip off, jack the vehicle up, pull the axle totally out one side, which is that's what you had to do, right?
Yep, that's exactly right.
And I did this alongside the road. Nowadays,
that's an accomplishment. That's an accomplishment.
Well, yeah, I didn't look at it like that. It's just like it had to be done. Period.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have money. I was lucky to spend the $20 for the axle. Nowadays, that happens, and people are just, oh my God, I'm going to junk the car.
Mm-hmm. I was talking with Mike Parsons. He's one of our instructors. He's very clever as well. And he had a failure in his car, and it was an older vehicle, and he didn't have a lot of money with him, I believe, at the time. So he drove down the road, and he found a car like the one he had, same kind of engine, in somebody's yard, and it was, not running. And I believe he had a water pump problem. He needed a water pump. So he asked the guy if he could buy the water pump. And he got the water pump, put it in his vehicle, and off he went. I mean, that is not, that's not typical thinking. And as you said, we got to call somebody. Why? And what if there's nobody to call? And that's the point of your broadcast and our broadcast. You don't have to call somebody. You can do it yourself. And there's plenty of YouTube videos on whatever you're trying to do. And I use them too. I mean, I don't know all the answers. And a lot of times I'll go, even if I do know the answer, I'll say to our son, I'll tell you what, let's take 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Let's go to YouTube. Let's see how other people do it. Because maybe they've got a better idea. Maybe they've got a better workaround. Maybe it'll be lighter, easier, and faster. Let's invest 10 or 15 minutes.
Well, I told you about, yard sales and everything else. Let's pretend, and when people ask me, well, how do I prepare? What do I store? What do I do? And I said, let's pretend that there's no store or service facilities for 1 year. Just start with a year. That's all. Everything that you think you might need in a year, well, that's what you should start with. I'm looking right now at 3 shelves of Chilton auto manuals that date back to 1946.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. And then I have a whole shelf of the modern Haynes automotive manuals. Mm-hmm. But I can name a vehicle. I've got a repair manual for it. Mm-hmm. That's what I buy at yard sales also.
I've got some of those Chilton manuals and Haynes manuals as well. I've got some in the studio. And we have a couple old Porsches 928. We have one that was owned by H. Ross Perot. Oh. And so I bought Yeah, it's a 1979 Porsche 928 V8 all aluminum engine, aluminum cylinders. Believe it or not, it's a brilliantly engineered vehicle. It's very sophisticated, very problematic. But so I have the manuals for that in the studio, and I'm looking at them. It takes I would say they're 15 volumes, 15 notebook volumes.
Oh my God! Well, can you use another motor for that? My brother has.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we have 3 of them left. We had 4, sold 1. We have 3 of them left. And boy, Mrs. Finelli is on my case. What are you going to do with them?
Well, that's the thing. My brother is the NRA rep for the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
And he has a piece of property that he stacks stuff on. This is what I call it. He has a 1941 Chevy 4-door sedan. He's got a 42 Ford delivery truck. He has he had 3 Porsches. He has 1920 Humboldt, but he has a brand new on the pallet Porsche 928 motor.
Wow.
And
there's
he has it is because he got it cheap. And that's it. He doesn't have a Porsche that he can put in.
Well, if I need one, I know where to go. We'll be right back. Boy, this hour's going fast. It really is. Kurt Wilson, armchairsurvivalist.com. Kurt Wilson's with us. Kurt, you're on the radio on Sundays, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. What are you going to be talking about? Can you give us a thumbnail of this Sunday's broadcast?
I haven't a clue. I can tell everybody this, but it's only 2 hours, and that's a misnomer. It's only 2 hours. The first hour, you'll get more news from me than you will get from any professional radio host in the world in a whole week. That's how much research I do every week. So I'm on 2 to 3 hours a day. I'm researching my show for the next Sunday. And the second hour, I like to have something that's going to help people survive a little bit better. I've had shows, especially on insulation. It had shows on insulation, show how to silence a generator, how to clean your guns. Believe it or not, I was a master gunsmith for 25 years, and I made so much money cleaning people's guns that they stopped working because they crudded up. How to refinish wood, how to refinish your gun stocks, how to plant, how to harvest, how to preserve food for long-term storage. I mean, you name it. Every single particle of your life is something that I can help you work and perform in a more optimum manner.
Okay.
It's like, okay, let me give you an idea. Anybody can sleep in a gutter. You're right. You're tired, fall down in the gutter, you go to sleep. I would rather sleep in a more optimum manner in a bed. Yeah, so it's the same thing. And I teach people how to work on their cars.
Tell me about how do you silence a generator? Because I had that situation, and let's compare notes. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, there's a couple things that you can do. You have your exhaust, okay? And usually it's just a little square box that goes onto the exhaust port, and that's your exhaust, and that's where about 75% of the sound comes from. Right. So what you do is you pull that off, and sometimes you can find actual exhaust flanges that'll fit right onto that. Sure. Okay, and then you would take and you would bring out a pipe, an exhaust pipe, muffler pipe, stainless or even iron if you want to, at least 1.5 inches, preferably 2 inches in diameter, and you will figure out the angle to this yourself, depending on where you're going to put your generator. But this will come out about 2 feet and then 90 degrees up into a motorcycle muffler. Okay? Okay. And then bring the pipe up higher, as high as you want. Now, some people have done this without even a muffler, and just the distance of the pipe that they come out will quiet it down some. So, and I've had other people say, no, I just use a car muffler I found in a junkyard, and I run the pipe through that. Another way is, this is the way that they used to do in the when I was on the reservation, is the generator, you have the flange that comes out, it goes down into a pit that they buried a 50-gallon drum with the hole cut out on top. Right. And they filled that drum with rock. Not small rock, but fist-sized rocks. And that pipe goes down into that. Now, they have a cover over the top of that so it won't fill up when it rains. That pretty much deadens the sound. The reason, the whole concept behind deadening the sound of a generator is so that people don't know you have it, so they won't come and steal it, or so they won't think that you have other things that they want to steal. Sure. And then again, you can always build a housing for it. And we've done this too. You don't want to buy any of these cheap plastic sheds, but you would build, say you got a 10,000 kilowatt generator, and you want to keep it as quiet as possible and out of sight. So you build a box around it, and you insulate the box with non-flammable materials, and you have it as a little shed. You're building a shed is what you're doing, and you have 2 openings. You have opening about 1 foot on one side and 1 foot on the other, and you put thermostatically controlled fans on those, like you have for your radiator. Some like electric radiator. On one side, it pulls cold air in. On the other side, it exhausts cold air and the exhaust of the generator. Yeah. Well, we're right in sync. What I did was I have a generator, 5,000 watt, 5 kW generator, box around it, metal box around it, inside a wooden frame building, and I used an automotive exhaust, fabricated that, and it goes up and out near the just under the roof. Can hardly hear it. I mean, literally can hardly hear it. Kurt Wilson, thank you so much for being with us, spending your time today. ArmchairSurvivalist.com.